So, something I've always wanted to work on was trying to figure out a way to rig a pull start or a manual start without a recoil onto a large Briggs engine that typically needs an electric starter to fire. So that's what I've been actually kind of out here doing today. I've been toying around with the Murray off-road mower because that's usually my guinea pig for most modifications. So what you're basically going to want to do is remove this top cover shroud, and there's usually a couple bolts on the front and a couple bolts on each side on the back. Usually one holding the dipstick on, and there's usually a couple holding the cover for the electric start nose gear thing, whatever you want to call it. So you'll get this top cover shroud off, and then you'll take a Torx bit and unscrew these 3 bolts right here, take the screen off. Here's the screen removed, and once you get this screen off of there, you're going to have this little plastic disc that's kind of sitting underneath the screen. Once you take that all off, you're going to be left with this little triangular metal thing with little tabs on it that the Torx bolts actually screw down into. And that's basically where you're going to stop removing parts from your motor. Here's what I've done. This is actually an idler pulley to a mower deck on like a Craftsman. And I mean idler pulley because it's not a spindle pulley. You can actually see it still has the idler bearing built into it right there. The only thing I did to it was drill 3 holes in it. I used this plastic piece as a template. I laid it down on top of my pulley. You got to get it as centered as you possibly can. Measure or whatever you've got to do, and then mark your 3 holes, pull this thing back off, drill your 3 holes, and then put the pulley down on top of that triangular metal thing on top of your flywheel and run your Torx screws right back down through your new holes. The other thing you're also going to have to do is create a little notch, which you can actually see right there. And it doesn't need to be very deep. In fact, you don't want it too deep because then the rope won't be able to pull out. And it also needs to be a directional notch. And the best way to figure out what direction your notch needs to go in is if you're standing over your motor typically spins clockwise. So a really easy way to figure this out is basically as you're spinning clockwise, you basically imagine your finger as a marker and you will want to make a gouge in a clockwise spiral sort of motion like this. There's a little gouge, kind of in a spiral formation. It's hard to explain, but it's very important that you have that. You cannot have a gouge straight up and down. It has to be at an angle like that. And here's the reason why. We're going to put a knot in this rope, in this pull rope, and when this thing spins around and the motor starts to run, this needs to release instantly. If this is a straight up and down notch, this thing could rip the pull cord right out of your hands, staying attached to the motor and basically creating a centrifugal pull starting cord of terror. But as you can see, I've obviously got mine screwed down and mostly in place. I have not tested it yet, as you can see, because I do not have the fan shroud in place. So I'm going to put all that back together right now. I've got my pull cord right here, and this thing is dead cold. Dead cold. See, I'm touching the exhaust, the head. This thing is dead cold. I'm not going to start it at all, and we're going to do a cold start with a pull start on this high compression 28 cubic inch Briggs flathead. Alright, we got the shroud back on. I bolted my dipstick tube back on so it doesn't blow out when I start it up. You can see that everything's still totally cold. Very cold. And what you're basically going to do here is you tie a knot in the end of your pull cord rope, and you don't want your pull cord rope too long. I'd say 2 feet is probably a maximum. But you'll put your cord in, your knot on the top, and then basically take your cord and wrap it around this whole thing here. Double check to make sure I've done this right because it's hard to see on camera. So what you do is make sure all your safety switches are on, your fuel, your clutch, and your brakes and everything, and give this thing a really good pull, which I can't do with one hand obviously with the camera in my hand, but let's give this thing a try and see how she fires. Alright, so I got the rope wrapped around there. I got it choked right up. I'm going to give this thing a damn good pull and hope it runs, and I hope it doesn't rip the cord out of my hand and kill me. There you go, guys. You can see it wasn't perfectly centered, but it's enough that it's not going to fly off of there and kill someone. The other thing you probably want to make sure of is that you leave a good amount of area in here open so this thing can still get air. But I'm going to try this setup for a little while, see how it works. I like the fact that I'm not stranded and relying completely on my battery. Say my battery dies or an electrical connection fails, or I just basically have to go commando and cut every wire off of this motor just to get me to limp home because something screws up or grounds out or whatever. I can start this thing and run it no matter what. I'll keep this pull cord with me in my little trunk that's under my rear seat, so I always have it. But there you go, guys. I hope you really like this modification. It's really easy. It took me probably less than an hour to do this. Like I said, just grab an idler pulley from a mower deck, any V-belt pulley. Really, any pulley will work. Just, use that little black piece, that black plastic piece I showed you, and drill your holes off of that using it as a template. Try to get it as centered as you perfectly can. Leave a little bit of space for the air to get in, and bingo, you're done. And it's a really good modification to have. Keep your pull cord with you, because if your battery dies or something bad happens, you always got a way to start your tractor. And I find myself out in the woods 3-4 miles sometimes. So a dead battery that far out and no way to start your tractor is definitely not something you want to have happen. So if you like the video, rate it up. If you hate it, rate it down. Let me know what you guys think. If you have better ideas or ways to improve this design, leave them in the comments below. Leave video responses. I'm sure other people would love to see them. But yeah, give this modification a try. It's cheap, easy, quick, and I think you can pretty much do it to any Briggs motor. But that's it for today's little tip, and we'll see you next time.